Floette, and Zygarde. The last two pieces we have left in this Legends ZA puzzle that we'll be finishing today. It's taken me a while, but for good reason, because of their central role not just in the legend, but ever since X, Y, and everything related to Kalos, figuring things out is much more complicated than with the regular megas, especially with all the unanswered questions the game has left us. And with the DLCs apparently heading in a completely different direction, we're going to be left wanting to know more. The designs don't exactly make things any clearer, honestly, but I like a challenge, so here we go. Get comfortable because we're about to dive deep into the roots of Kalos. A good starting point to understand Mega Zygarde is to first understand its previous form, Zygarde 100%, which we've finally been able to see in action. And the first thing that stands out are its strong parallels with Rayquaza. And no, we're not just talking about their green color or the fact that their Mega forms have almost the same strength, with only a 2 base point difference. Interestingly, Zygarde is the only Mega in history not to gain 100 points. Both are guardians of the balance of ecosystems, who, in the face of an unprecedented crisis, would miraculously manifest the purest and most powerful incarnation imaginable of the ideal of Mega Evolution. But they also have their differences. We first met Rayquaza calming the ancient titans, Groudon and Kyogre, in Sutopolis City, after they lost control at the same time due to human influence, putting the delicate balance of land and water at risk, with potentially apocalyptic consequences. Rayquaza's appearance in Pokémon Emerald, and the fact that it often stops Groudon and Kyogre in the series, leads many to mistakenly think Rayquaza was made just for that. But that's not true at all. Its role as a defender goes far beyond that, being a protector of the entire Pokémon world, spending its life traveling along the edges of the sky in search of any threat to the planet, especially unexpected threats that come from outer space. That explains why, in the games, it appears not only at the Sky Pillar, but also in other temples and similar ceremonial buildings in different regions where various civilizations have worshipped it since ancient times, going to those places to rest or respond to calls for help. But Rayquaza does not have a fixed home. Its home is the very skies it is tasked with protecting. Zygarde, on the other hand, protects from below. To fulfill that same role as protector of balance and order, it divides itself into thousands of selves scattered across the planet like sensors. Fragments of its consciousness that watch to make sure everything remains in order. Sometimes, a portion of those selves gather in the form of a serpent to hide away in some secret and isolated place, joining forces in preparation for a future threat. And other times, a smaller portion takes the form of a dog that races across the world at lightning speed, searching for clues and allies to face that future challenge. If the threat were powerful enough, Zygarde would unify all its selves to manifest its true form, a protective god of overwhelming strength that will annihilate the enemy to restore the natural order of things. But in Legends ZA, we see for the first time how the awakening of an enemy so powerful approaches that not even that form is enough. One that makes it need an even more powerful form. And in Lumiose, the place where Mega Evolution was born, it finds hope. There's another thing it has in common with Rayquaza. Thousands of years ago, when a meteorite of monstrous proportions, so huge that not even it could destroy it, was approaching the planet, it still hurled himself at it without hesitation, awakening, driven by its desire to save the world and humanity, the first Mega Evolution. And Zygarde also didn't seem to have any certainty that it would achieve that transformation. It doesn't have the organs that allowed Rayquaza to absorb cosmic energy to achieve it, nor a natural Megastone, instead giving the player an ordinary little stone. The only thing it had was the conviction that it had to protect the balance and the faith that someone so exceptional was the only one who could help him turn it into a Megastone and trigger the Mega Evolution at the decisive moment. Just like with Rayquaza, what we see at the climax of the games is the first time in history that Zygarde takes on that form, turning both of them into the epitome of what Mega Evolution represents, the bond between humanity and Pokémon to fight together for a greater good, even if it means giving their lives, achieving the true pure manifestation of this phenomenon, since the rest of the Megastones were born from death, from the excess energy that remained trapped in the region after the terrible firing of the ultimate weapon, resulting in forms that granted power, but often in a twisted way, and causing the Pokémon to suffer, as we've seen with the uncontrolled Mega Evolutions. Zygarde's Mega Evolution, on the other hand, is born purely from trust, love, and hope, which makes it pure, perfect, and with unprecedented power. The shared desire to look forward, which, as it could not be otherwise, ended up defeating Angie, an aberration that, even though it was created with good intentions by AZ, was still fueled by death and desolation. Now that we've seen its story and role in the game and what it means for Kalos, we can finally better understand its origins and inspirations, specifically the touches of Norse mythology that have always permeated the legendaries of Kalos. One might think that this doesn't really fit with that region, it would be more fitting for a possible region based on Northern Europe, but in reality, Game Freak has always liked to mix cultures. For example, Unova, which is based on New York, draws from the Chinese philosophy of Taoism. The Balanced Triad would be mainly based on Yggdrasil, the Tree of Life from Norse mythology. Xerneas, the one who gives life in the deer that inhabit the trunk. Yveltal, the one who takes it away in the blind eagle that lives in the treetop. And the one we're concerned with, Zygarde, the serpent that dwells in the deep roots. New layer of depth is added to the symbolism with the XYZ letters, since the deer inhabits the ground, the X-plane horizontal, the eagle the skies, the Y-plane vertical, and the serpent dragon, the underground or the underworld, or the Z-plane of depth. But Zygarde has also been associated with Loki's children. Its 10% form, shaped like a wolf, would correspond to Fenrir, symbol of unleashed instinct. The 50% form, to Jormungandr, whose appearance signals the collapse of the gods. And its complete form would be Hel, the entity that rules the boundary between life and death and keeps the cycle under control. So maybe Mega Zygarde is based on its father, Loki himself. A god who is often misunderstood and associated with destruction, but who is actually a symbol of renewal, watching over the restoration of the natural order when balance is corrupted. In mythology, Loki kills the radiant god Balder, using a spear made of mistletoe, the only plant capable of harming him, which we could see reflected in Mega Zygarde's design, with its large cannon weapon shaped like a tree and roots. Used to destroy Angie, the manifestation of that corrupt order and distortion of the life and death cycle. Because one of the fundamental aspects around which Norse mythology revolves is the cycle of sin, followed by punishment, and finally, redemption. And this Pokemon is the defender of that natural order. AZ committed the original sin in this story, breaking the balance between life and death with his actions, which led him to be punished by Zygarde with a torturous existence in solitude for more than 3,000 years, from which he would finally be redeemed after Pokemon Legends ZA, allowing him to rest in peace. Without a doubt, the most interesting twist in the game, since until now we believed he had simply gained immortality along with Floette, and now Lysandra, his successor with royal blood, who after reaching perhaps even greater levels of evil in XY, must serve his own 3,000 years of punishment to be redeemed. And the cycle will go on, and there will be Zygarde watching over to make sure it stays that way. And now, Floette. Once again, to understand what's going on with this thing, and why it has an umbilical cord tied to its flower, we first have to ask, what exactly are AZ and the Eternal Floette? Yes, we've known for a long time that he's the ancient king of Kalos, and his beloved Pokemon who died in the war, plunging AZ into despair, which led him to create an artifact to bring it back to life, at the cost of thousands of innocent lives to harvest that life energy. But that's just scratching the surface of the story. Who is this man who, thousands of years ago, obviously long before all the technological advances we've seen in the Pokémon world using the life energy of pocket monsters as fuel, was already able, in an ancient era, to create by himself a machine to resurrect his Pokémon? Years later, he built the ultimate weapon to fire that same energy, and centuries after that, completely alone as an old wanderer with no kingdom left, he created Angie, the most miraculous and sophisticated artifact of all, meant to radiate life not just to a single individual, but to the entire region. AZ's entire role in the game, his background and redemption, is fine. But if you stop to think about it, we actually still know almost nothing about him. What kind of prodigy is he to be able to create all those miraculous works by himself, so advanced that not even with the current technology in the Pokémon world and full research teams are they anywhere close to replicating them? But even more mysterious is his beloved Pokémon, about which the only thing we really know is the species it resembles. But it seems pretty unlikely to think that it's actually just an ordinary Floette. Even in the XY cutscenes, we saw that, ever since it was with AZ during the happy times before the war, it already had that unique appearance and its mysterious flower. Given its important role in the war itself, it's even possible that it already possessed that overwhelming power back then, a power unlike that of a normal Floette. Whatever it was that made it change must have happened before the war, and not as a result of its resurrection after dying in it as it might seem. What if this Floette was AZ's first great creation, his first attempt at achieving something similar to Mega Evolution? And the key lies in the eternal flower it carries. Because a few of you might remember how in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, in Sutopolis we see a huge tree decorated with one of these flowers. And as soon as we arrive, we're told that it was indeed an extremely tall man who planted it. We also know that this flower was a gift from his mother, so it seems this royal lineage hides many more secrets than we thought. Could it be a divine dynasty with deep knowledge of ancient technology, magical arts, and the manipulation of life energy? Could it be that this variety of flower, besides being the family crest, also has magical properties that allow it to absorb that life energy, with Floette being just one more creation of that lineage? Combining a poor average Pokemon with that flower, because if you look closely, even the ultimate weapon was created with a design that resembles the flower. One thing is clear. We already knew that AZ was no saint, but all the clues in this game point to him being not just a genius, but someone even more terrible than we could have imagined. He not only fired the ultimate weapon and resurrected Floette at the cost of killing thousands, maybe Floette itself was the first victim of his experiments, because Lysander is the antagonist in whom we've seen the greatest display of evil and cynicism. He intended to kill the vast majority of humanity, except for a few handpicked by him, and we see that in this game, he received exactly the same punishment as AZ, to wander for 3,000 years. So for the king to receive that same punishment, he must have committed some truly horrific acts. Lysander is in fact the descendant of that bloodline, and the direct successor of AZ, as well as another technological genius ahead of his time, which makes it all the more deterministic and ironic. That would help us understand much better why Floette left him. Maybe the reason AZ loved it so much is that even though it was the result of a rather cruel experiment, Floette forgave him and treated him with love, which made AZ start to reconsider his path and become a more virtuous king. But when a war broke out and the beloved Pokemon who had showed him such pure kindness and innocence died, he couldn't control his pain and resentment, turning the resurrection machine into the ultimate weapon and causing the massacre that ended the war, something Floette could no longer bear, and so it finally left him. Perhaps it was after that act that Zygarde punished him with the torturous immortality, taking 3,000 years to redeem himself, at which point Floette would forgive him and the curse would be broken, his life cycle resuming and blessing him with a few final years to enjoy alongside his old friend. This further reinforces what I said in the last video. If anyone deserved to finally rest in peace at the end of this story, it was Floette. But You know how it is, it's Pokémon, and they had to make it catchable or people would storm the Game Freak offices with weapons, and not the ultimate one precisely. To wrap everything up, since we've talked about the design of all the megas, when it comes to Floette, pretty much the only significant change is its flower, reinforcing the idea that the key to everything lies within it, something only AZ knew. It ends up looking quite a bit like a hybrid between the out-of-control angel and the ultimate weapon, but more importantly and interestingly, as we mentioned at the beginning, Floette's body is now connected to the flower by what looks like an umbilical cord. This could symbolize how it's an eternal baby frozen in time, unable to evolve, immortal, feeding directly from the very source of life. But that's how we wrap up this story of Legend ZA as we wait for the DLC, which we hope has something interesting in store for us. Personally, I don't have very high expectations, but I do hope Emma gets a chance to shine there. Taking advantage of the whole Hoopa and its portals theme, it would be perfect for her, and I want to believe that the best character from XY still has more to offer us. Anyway, we'll analyze everything when the time comes. But for now, we're wrapping up this episode and going back to our usual videos. If you haven't already, check out the other videos I made about Legend ZA, where I go in depth about its megas and explain why I didn't like its story. Be good!